Chapter 17, The Last Goddess. Darkness surrounded the Wolf Queen when she opened her eyes. All her sovereignty, her emotional strength and her composure gave way more and more to a fear like she had never felt before. Where are we? What is this magic? She wondered aloud, feeling as if she were floating in a vacuum. It takes a while for you to see, Serena, a female voice sounded from somewhere. Who are you? What is this place? Exclaimed the monarch, hastily moving her arms and legs, which were wrapped in her red, distinguished dress. No one held her, there was no breeze, no resistance, and no light. Only the she-wolf herself was illuminated by a glow whose origin could not be discerned. A moment later, a delicate silhouette formed before her eyes, which gradually became stronger and formed a landscape. Around her then became daylight, and now she recognized trees, bushes, a meadow. On this she sat now, looking around hastily, when the environment had completely cleared up and the darkness had disappeared. A gentle breeze was palpable, and warmth surrounded the queen. Birds flew in the bright blue sky over her head and soft rustling filled the air. "Fear not," spoke the mysterious voice, and suddenly a large, wet wolf nose stepped through the tall blades of grass. For a moment the mistress was startled and her heart pounded as she recognized the peaceful-looking face of a Canid before her. "By the gods! Who are you?" she asked and jumped up. "I am Aria. Surely you know me under the name Jaja." "I'm glad you can see now too, Serena of Samojaja," the wolf being spoke, bowing her head down in a friendly and respectful manner. Stylish as Serena was, she nobly held out her hand to the four-legged she-wolf so that Aria could kiss it. But she only grinned and gently licked the back of her hand with her tongue. "Well?" exclaimed the Majesty, piqued. "We must beg your pardon. Don't you know how to greet your queen properly? That is very rude of you to salivate at us like that. Shame on you." But the mother wolf only chuckled. "Oh, forgive me, your Majesty. I forgot that you are of noble blood." "That's better," her counterpart admonished. "Let's walk a bit, Serena," Aria asked, but the addressed one reluctantly stopped and crossed her arms. "How do you even talk to us? Have we allowed you to call us by name? You are quite rude, miss." Aria sighed. "All right. Apparently you don't realize who I am, do you? You say you are Jaja." "That's right." "Please," said the regent deprecatingly, "do not be ridiculous. This is only a dream that we have because we ate this fruit. Jaja does not really exist. She is only part of a fairy tale told to infidel wolf children. If you were really a goddess, you would not have to walk on four paws like a primitive." Aria had expected this statement, for she knew Serena intimately, as did all the other Samoyedans, Aramarans, and Alsatians. "As you wish," she spoke, raising her head and turning into a figure of light. The glow was so bright that it blinded the wolf queen and she had to shield her eyes behind her hand. When she lowered them again, Aria stood before her in anthropomorphic, bipedal form. She, too, was now wearing a red dress, and for a brief moment Serena thought she was looking into a mirror. "You are," she stuttered out, "really her?" "Yes, that's me. This form should certainly seem a little more comfortable to you, even though I don't usually use it." "By the gods!" marveled the monarch, immediately dropping to her knees. "Please forgive us, Goddess Jaja. We did not mean to offend you. We sincerely apologize." "This," the goddess noted, "is the first time I've ever heard an apology from you. You are usually very confident and unyielding. I see that you have understood who I am." "Why, yes, of course. Now get up again. It is unnecessary to pay homage to me. I prefer more the strong queen than a submissive vixen." Quickly the ruler rose again and together they walked through the tall grass, which because of her dress, was a very strenuous endeavor for Serena. "How far is it, our goddess?" she groaned. "We're already there," Aria noted, as the two suddenly found themselves standing in front of a patch of flattened grass with a small, brown stone placed in its center. "What is this?" asked Serena, getting the explanation from Aria. "This is the origin of Aramaria, the center of your planet, and also the beginning of all thoughts about your world." "So, what does that tell us now?" "The Ispaseka Aramaria is the place where Aram, oh forgive me, Samo and I consolidated the beginning of everything concerning foxes and wolves. Admittedly, I took this stone out of our cave to show it to you. So the center of the world is a bit shifted at the moment. Do you understand? What do you mean by that? The center of the world is now in a different place. It's no longer all about Bolmare and the Aramarans. The funny thing, though, is that nobody seems to notice right now. Thoughtfully, the monarch walked up to the stone and knelt down in front of it. And where is said center now? She wanted to know as Arya knelt beside her. Only one God is able to replace what is most important in the world and direct the action of whole nations according to it. This here is Alsatianaya. At least it will be in the future. Alsatianaya? You've got to be kidding. This rocky chain in the south is almost uninhabitable. Only dogs live there, as the Lord Sovereign is one. What could there be there that would be of interest to many? Now that there is hardly anyone left in Alsatianaya, the sheepdogs have joined the fight of the wolves against the foxes, the people have set out towards the mountains. They are, in their insatiable greed for wealth and consumption, out to get the treasures from the rocky soil of the land. Now that almost only females and pups live there, their men nearly all at war, the Gajans will have an easy time taking whatever they want. That can't be possible. The transport tubes don't reach there. You can't get to Alsatianaya without. The Wolf Queen began and interrupted, for she now understood. Their goddess completed, without crossing Samojija. And after Amarok has angered their president, accused of the attack, you can imagine how they will justify such a move. I'm sure it will take them a while, but they will come. She was right, they had greatly angered the Gajan president, told him that they would no longer tolerate the parasitic people on Alpha Vol, and some culpability for the attack on Otomak could not be denied. So it should be possible that the Gajans would take revenge on the Anthros, gain an advantage by plundering the now almost unguarded resources in Alsatianaya. Serena thought regretfully that a few years ago she had willingly opened the door to the people, granted them access to Aramaria and Samojija. They were there, along with their weapons, soldiers, cars. They had been prepared for everything for a long time, and the supplies were already ready to be picked up at their feet. What have we done? She asked herself bitterly. We can't let that happen. She exclaimed grimly, but Arya immediately muffled, they have been moving freely in your land for a long time, my child. They will overrun Alsatianaya. It's only a matter of a few more days. Startled, Serena looked at her and accused her of having known all this anyway as a goddess. Why didn't you intervene? Don't you care about any of your children? What kind of a mother are you? These questions angered the other wolf and she spoke angrily, your father and I gave you life. We never wanted this to happen. I always tried to protect you and even warned Radovan Carteron about the future. He didn't listen. What else do you think I should have done but give Amarok and his friend Joliad the key to knowledge so they would help bring peace? Insight? Asked Serena, standing up, now also full of anger. What kind of insights are these supposed to be? The ones that led Amarok to this foolish planning of an attack? The ones that led Joliad to confront his leader without thinking of the consequences? Yes, those very ones. The deity hissed, now jumping up as well to face her counterpart. I gave them the key to understanding their world. What they made of it sprang from their own free choices alone. Then the queen became calm again and regained her self-confidence. Surely you don't think her own decisions are the origin of her deeds, but the pen of her true creator, don't you? What? The other she-wolf now asked without understanding. Who do you mean? What creator? I and my spouse are the creators of all of you. You are not, and you know it, Jaja. Still the moon wolf looked questioningly, for she knew nothing of Gajaze's dream and not that a dying man should be the father and architect of all life and action on Alpha Vol. Your lack of understanding testifies to the fact that you cannot be a deity. You are an impostor, nothing more. You should know everything as a goddess, understand everything. Also, who this writing Gajan is. Even if he is not what the Kisar reports him to be, you should know that he exists. Don't say that, Serena, Arya now spoke pleadingly, tenderly taking the other she-wolf's head between her hands. Do not tell me that you will lose faith in me and in your father. You are descended from us, as the Queen Samojija, even in a direct line. Have you forgotten that? Reluctantly, the mistress slapped the arms of her goddess away from her and opened up to her. This dog, Chenerah Gajaze, has told us everything. How is it that he seems to know more than you do? I have never met him. I can't see through his eyes. In fact, I don't know this Gajan he seems to be talking about either. He seems to move out of my sight. Believe me, my child, I do not understand it myself how it can be. Out of the corner of her eye, Chenerah could see the stone of origin reflecting the sunlight and lying there in the grass like an insignificant piece of rock. She turned to him and now sat down in front of him. It was working in her head. Gajaze had told her that a person known only to him designed all the events, made them all. The foxes and wolves, meaningless, played with them like pieces on a game board. Was Jaja, Arya, or whoever she was, also just a puppet, made to amuse and satisfy the soul of an all-seeing creator? You know, such a realization is very confusing, my goddess, Chenerah spoke, looking intently at the stone. It is, she got confirmation, while Arya changed back into the four-legged she-wolf behind her. Let's not argue about that, my daughter. Rather, you should use the information you now have. Since I can't talk to him, advise the Kesar to go to Alsatiania with you and Amarok and let dogs and wolves defend this land. Protect the point of origin and the sanctuaries of the Hedonaries, the mountains of the land. You mean the resources, don't you? Not only that. Hidden in the midst of the Hedonaries is a lake where the Ispasetka lies submerged in your timeline. I took it from Arimaria when the first people had recently entered the vault of the Cave of Origin, which you had sealed. After the door to it was opened again, I had to remove the stone and move the center point so that the humans could not get their hands on it. If this happens, this world is lost. For in that stone lies the soul of your creation. Now Chenerah realized what was happening around her. The war between the foxes and the wolves was calling the humans, so Arya gave Joliat and Amarok each their insights so that they could change the world, each in his own way. These were failures, however, and when the wolf goddess realized that the origin of the world had become vulnerable due to man's advance to the vicinity of Ispasetka, she had to reposition it. However, she had chosen a place that was difficult to access, but not inaccessible to man. Yes, you have taken the center somewhere else. Still, it's not safe, is it? While wolves and foxes are grinding away at the division line across the realm in the midst of Arimaria because they are equals, you now want to send as many dogs and wolves as possible back to Alsatiania to oppose the humans as cannon fodder. What are you implying? Asked the silver she-wolf, who had now sat down next to the queen. It appears that you are only promoting a war on several fronts because you don't care what becomes of your descendants as you frantically try to hold on to your dead man and your pride in your heritage. How can you say that, Chenerah? Spoke Arya in shock, unable to believe that the other she-wolf seemed to actually believe what she was saying. Suddenly, the goddess turned to her and, in a flash, clasped the neck of the terrified Arya with her hands. She squeezed tightly and stretched the animal to the ground, kneeling on the goddess and blocking her legs. Say Chenerah. What? Arya gasped, unable to resist. Doggedly, the once noble and cool regent squatted on her and bared her teeth threateningly. You want to kill us all? For you, we are toys. Only because you are so obsessed with your divinity and the idea that everyone must believe your lies. We know what happened to Banado. And we also know that the faith, as it is written, is a single lie. With widened eyes, Arya tried to defend herself against her adversary. Again and again she struggled, breathing heavily and gasping for air. She suspected that she had no chance against Chenerah in her current appearance and gathered her strength, after which she turned back into an anthro-wolf. The queen, who saw this coming, was able to close her eyes at the last moment to protect herself from the glare. Still squeezing the other fawn's neck, the underdog failed to free herself from her predicament by striking. Arya hit Chenerah on the lip with her fist, which loosened her grip somewhat, but did not result in a complete release. The regent was strong and brave, as it always belonged to a she-wolf in her position. Chenerah, please. Stop it. The goddess pleaded, but now she had an enemy who would not let go of her. You, who betrayed your former wolf companion, the true Samo, for a fox, are to blame for everything, not Banado. You have harmed the people of Alpha Vol for the last time. Shouted Chenerah grimly, causing Arya to squirm and both of them to roll in the grass. Several times the upper hand changed. One moment Arya squatted on her opponent and punched her in the face, screaming all the time, "Stop it! Enough! In the next, Chenerah was again sitting on the mother of wolves and in her turn was hitting with all her might. They were like two bitches who could not let go of each other and would fight until one of them was finally killed. Now the queen got hold of Arya's neck again and squeezed again, whereupon she bit around herself. The grip did not loosen and Arya's gasping grew louder. As she began to roll her eyes, she caught sight of the Ispasetka within reach of her arm and grabbed it courageously and with her last strength. One last time. As a last resort. With last effort. Quickly she swung her arm to strike the stone at the monarch's head, but powerlessly she missed. Chenerah took a hand from her neck to intercept the goddess and now gained possession of the stone herself. This gave Arya some breathing room and at last she was able to loosen her enemy's grip with her hands, whereupon she fell over, yelled out and struggled to get up. They were both exhausted and desperately crawled a few steps on the ground. The Majesty's rage was unabated and despite the onset of weakness after the grueling tussle, she threw herself at her goddess, who had turned on her back again and held her hands protectively in front of her tear-filled face. "Please, Chenerah, don't do this," she brought forth, but the monarch deliberately overheard her plea. A first, second, and third blow with the stone to Arya's head and face followed and were accompanied by cries of, "No. Please. Don't." The anger was written on Chenerah's now shaggy fur face. Doggedly she pulled up her lips, bared her teeth, so that saliva dripped from her muzzle and Arya's face, which was getting redder and redder from the blood. Both wolves were covered in torn blades of grass, filthy with soil, and Arya's red dress was drenched in even darker color, starting at the collar. "Die at last!" screamed the queen, striking relentlessly as the underdog convulsively stretched her arms away from her, desperately trying to claw her hands into the surrounding turf. A few slower strokes followed, after which the goddess stopped twitching and Chenerah lifted the stone into the air with both hands for the last time. Like a red ball, the color of which was identical to that of the monarch's hands, it now hovered over the goddess' shattered skull, the sight of which made Chenerah start to cry. "What have we done? By the gods! What have we done?" she thought to herself, dropped the stone, collapsed and embraced the corpse of her godmother, whose head was only a single red mass, crying. But abruptly her weeping ceased, for a very different thought filled the queen's mind. She had killed Gajaze, a goddess. She had destroyed her and now she would be the highest she-wolf of all. Suddenly she stood up and knocked the earth off her dress. But how should she now find her way home again? When would this dream, or whatever this was, end? If all this was fiction, was it even possible that she had killed the wolf goddess? While she was asking herself these questions and thinking, slowly recovering from the past fight, the carcass of the dead wolf turned into bright light. Not knowing what this meant, Chenerah took a few steps back and observed what was happening there. The body now consisted exclusively of a glow, which slowly moved towards her. Frozen, she stopped, but showed no fear. The unknown light now hovered directly in front of her face and a part of it disappeared in a flash into her astonished open muzzle, while another part flew towards the sky and went out. The monarch choked as the ghostly light entered her, grabbing her throat. It felt like a strong scratching in her throat and led to a coughing fit where she squeezed her eyes shut. She awoke abruptly in her chair, where moments ago she had been the first she-wolf ever to bite a kopecheka. She was still coughing as she tore her eyes open and Chenerah and her butler held her gently. "Your Majesty, it's all right." The servant spoke soothingly. "There you are again," rejoiced Chenerah, smiling. Amarok, who had knelt opposite his queen, visibly had a load off his mind. "Phew," he said. "I thought that was going to go wrong. Thank the gods you woke up." The monarch blinked quickly and drank a sip of water that her servant handed her. "How long?" she wanted to know. "What do you mean, Your Majesty?" he then asked. "How long were we gone?" "Just a few minutes," Chenerah explained to her. Slowly, Chenerah came to her senses, calmed down, and exclaimed, We have to go. Quickly." "Majesty?" asked Amarok incomprehensibly, and his Alsatian friend had also tilted his head questioningly. "The Gajans are on their way to Alsatiania. Our goddess has hidden the Ispasetka in Hedon Lake and now it is in danger. Kesar, you must call your countrymen to you. You must defend the stone." "What are you saying? You really spoke with the wolf mother? Do you now believe what I said?" Chenerah inquired, but she sputtered out that they had to hurry, that the dogs should quickly order the troops back from the south of Arimaria. It doesn't matter, she said, what we believe. It is important that this stone, as the power of everything, is protected. People must not reach it. Thoughtfully, Gajaze took his wolf friend aside and turned away from the angry queen. Don't you think she's different somehow, Amarok? He asked in a whisper. That's obvious. After all, she just met Jaja and was the first wolf to ever experience such a state. That's a bit different from just dreaming about the gods, don't you think? Maybe so. Still, she speaks so differently. It's just the excitement, nothing more. The wolf waved it off and looked back at his queen, who had now stood up and was talking excitedly to a servant. Suddenly she shouted, "We have to go. Hurry! The president of the Gajans was killed in the tumult, and they will take revenge. It is possible that as they cross our nation, they will destroy everything in their path." What, the president? No, that's completely impossible, Serena. I never wrote it down like that. You're wrong, Chenerah shook his head, but the monarch grabbed him by the hand and pulled him to a window. They looked out, and in amazement the shepherd dog recognized in the distance that several columns of Samoyeden military vehicles were passing the outskirts of Luna. Our people are heading toward them. It can't be very long before they meet. The humans are attacking. It can't be possible, the dog spoke in despair and added, it's not supposed to be like this. They can't possibly overcome the Hedonaries as a natural barrier. It doesn't make sense. Well, how long do you think, Serena began, bracing her hands on her hips, it will take the Gajans? They're resourceful, and I'm sure they have ideas about how to get past the mountains. They spotted scattered wolves on the streets of the capital, returning to their homes at a fast pace. Now and then, military shouts rang out and the rumble of vehicles grew louder. These are the bodyguards of the royal house, the rest of our fighting soldiers. Our sources say that this fox who shot there is heavily incriminating Amarok. The Gajans blame him for the attack and also for the death of their president, the queen explained, and Kisar understood. While wolves and foxes were distracted by the current situation and were beating each other's skulls in Arimaria, the Gajans were taking advantage of the moment and were about to take revenge on the Anthros at their weakest point at the moment. They had been in Samojija for a long time anyway, and now wanted to find a culprit for the attack, overthrow the monarchy in one go, and occupy Samojija to be closer to Alsatianaya's raw materials. Maybe I'd better turn myself in, sighed Amarok, who was now also looking out the window and quickly grasping the situation. No, my wolf, I won't let you. Spoke Gajaze confidently, grabbing his friend by the shoulders. Yes, I do, I have to go. It's all my fault. If I face them, they will get their culprit and maybe leave us alone. No, the sheepdog again refused, you don't know them, Amarok. They've found a reason to invade now, and whatever we do now, they won't leave until they get what they want. And what do they want? As if from one mouth, Chenerah and Serena spoke, he using the word, revenge, she the word raw materials. Amarok, was, practically one of them. Believe me, they're really angry now, and they're razing everything to the ground, the Kisar said, and the regent nodded in agreement. We must flee. She ordered, and then, accompanied by summoned bodyguards, they ran down the stairs toward the cellar. As they passed, Amarok nimbly reached into a bowl containing a remaining kopacheka and pocketed it. With the boat, we should be in Alsatianaya faster than the humans, Gajaze noted, and the she-wolf asked him how he knew about their secret escape plan. I told you, Serena, all this comes from my mind. Still don't believe me? You will grit your teeth on the mountains for a while. There's no map of Alsatianaya, and the little underground stream under your castle is nowhere to be found. That may be, dear dog. But then allow us to ask how you could lose control of all this, she teased, as the group hurried quickly through the sparsely lit, damp tunnel. He is playing war with us, Your Majesty. Excuse me? The architect, the person who writes this book. The one on Gaja, my queen, Amarok added, for he had understood. The underground escape route, next to which a small stream flowed, was built many years ago and also served as a supply tunnel for the palace in times of numerous wars between wolves and foxes. The sheer endless tunnel was equipped on its walls with small torches, whose fire was reflected in the water. How fantastic! Rejoiced Amarok, but also wanted to know who is maintaining that illumination. These fires blaze at all hours of the day and night, dear Amarok, the she-wolf explained. We have several servants specifically for this purpose, who patrol twice each day. After all, we must always have a means of escape. So it was years ago, so it is today. The boat is ready for you, Your Majesty, one of the bodyguards remarked, and the protectors began clearing branches and brush from the edge of the creek, exposing a small watercraft. A simple, wooden boat was to enable their escape. Not high technology, but something that could function independently of any resource as long as there was this small, flowing stream. It's just big enough for three, the young wolf remarked, and his queen nodded. You stay here and defend the estate, Chenerah addressed the guards. Seal the tunnel and hold them off as long as you possibly can. Send a message to the south of Arimaria. Tell the Alsatians to withdraw and meet us in Catherine, Chenerah ordered in his turn. Once they were seated in the boat, Amarok handed out the paddles. He held out a pair of them to his monarch, whereupon she looked at him questioningly. You don't mean that we should row, Amarok? Yeah, why not? We are the queen. Please don't forget that. We. There are 6 paddles, the sheepdog intervened, and we have 6 hands. It's a long way to the Hedonaries. Yes, it will take about a whole day. We know that because, after all, we are aware of the extent of our realm and the length of the tunnel, Lord Kesar, Chenerah boasted, while Amarok looked questioningly at his friend, not knowing what to do now. The dog, however, spoke angrily, Quite right, Your Majesty. And if you do not prefer to cover the distance by walking, you will paddle with us now. Believe me, we don't need you to find the way to my home. What are you saying? I have to say, Kesar. She began indignantly, but Amarok annoyedly interrupted her. Now paddle already, you stupid cow. Shocked, his mistress opened her muzzle and earned nasty looks from her companions. Reluctantly and unable to come up with a suitable answer, she took the paddles and they set off. At least you didn't say you, Amarok, she spoke meekly, which gave the sheepdog a sly smile. Do you think it's true about the rock, Chenerah? The young wolf wanted to know. How can a simple piece of rock be so important? What do people actually want with it? The Ispasetka is very powerful. It is not just a stone. Used properly, it's an almost inexhaustible source of energy. And as the people on their Gaja run out of fossil fuels. You can guess. I see. In our country, people used to say that the stone was a legend of the Aramarans and that you could travel through time with it, such fairy tales. The dog nodded, yes, I certainly know these stories. Who knows what there is to them, my wolf? Our world is full of myths that have always fascinated our peoples. When they had already advanced a few hundred paces, they heard a thunderous bang and looked in fright at the direction from which they had come. A large cloud of dust obscured the torches behind them, and they now knew, part of the tunnel had just been blown up. The intruders should have no chance to follow them by water. They continued rowing and Chenerah noted that they seemed to be lucky with the current. Surely they would reach the mountains faster than they thought. They left the capital of Samojija behind them, but they could only guess what they were doing. Every meter of the tunnel resembled the previous one. Amarok sank into thoughts, the houses with their small lights, which had to be above them now. Would people, in their hatred, destroy everything? Would they exploit it, squeeze it like a fruit, until there would be nothing left worth returning for? Would they ever be able to return? Would all the little houses and paths, fields and farms still be there? Would there even be any wolves left in Samojija? Amarok, he was addressed by his friend and pulled from his thoughts, get some sleep. The current is good in Chenerah and I will continue. We'll take turns resting. The wolf did as he was told and put the oars aside. He curled up in the sparse space and turned his back on his fellow passengers. Stealthily he reached into his pocket and took out the kopacheka. As he looked at her rosy, soft skin and turned her in his hand, he couldn't help thinking of his friend Joliad. I hope you are well, my darling. I miss you. I should never have done all this. Why had he deceived his fox like that? What had he expected from it? Had he ever thought about what the future would have looked like for them both if Carteron had continued to exist? Why had he allowed himself to be so guided by his anger? Now that he had seen from Chenerah's example that kopachekas did no harm even to wolves, He timidly bit from the fruit and chewed silently so that no one would notice. He hoped to meet Jaja, and perhaps Joliad, even if the latter once thought that their meeting in Amarok's bath would be the only one. The wolf's eyes grew moist as he had the last thought before falling asleep. I cheated on you and today I can't even tell you what I was thinking, Vixen. I'm so sorry. If I can find a way to make it up to you, I will. I promise you that. Poor Amarok, the she-wolf sighed, looking at him. I'm sure he didn't mean for any of this to happen. What do you think, Kisar? You mean the attack on Atamok? Yes. Do you really believe what this Josiah says? That Amarok gave him the gun and incited him to murder Atamok? Do you think he once wanted the death of Atamok's father? Thoughtfully, the dog put the paddles on the edge of the boat and said, it's not his fault what happened. He just wanted to be happy with his friend and still be there for his people. It tore him apart. The anger tore him apart. I'm sure you'll know how that works with wolves and their temper. Yes, sometimes it is so that you forget everything around you. We're a little different, though, because nothing upsets us, Lord Kisar. Not everyone has this good fortune, Your Majesty. He is still so young and has already experienced so much pain. He is a strong wolf, good-natured and honorable, the mistress pointed out. Take note, Kisar, when the fighting ends, we will reward him richly. He shall wear a medal as an honorary citizen of Samojaja. If you know him, Your Majesty, then I'm sure you also know that he doesn't care much about such things. Surely you are right, dear sovereign. But what is it that our subject wants and needs? You surely know him better than we do. It is what your people have always wanted and needed, a life of peace, surrounded by those you love, the male explained and sighed. Do you love him then? She continued to ask, which the dog had to think about for a moment. Surely you will not fully understand, but Joliad, Amarok and I. We belong together, we are a unit, part of the same spirit and the same idea. You mean the idea of this earthling who is writing this book? The architect, isn't it? Yes, you have recognized that very well. I think you can call him an architect, he confirmed and began to row on. But you said that all of this, we are all a part of this person. Doesn't that mean we are all the same? In a way it is, yes, she got confirmation. But the three of us, the fox, the wolf and the dog, are direct reflections of his soul. Everything that surrounds the three of us is the construct in which the soul of our Creator moves. Serena noted, very complicated, quite obviously. When the tunnel ended, the Alsatian looked questioningly at the sky. The moon was visible and seemed larger and more radiant than on other full moon nights. I don't remember it like that at all, he mused. You must mean her, that is, Jaja? Yes, she shines significantly brighter than usual, for whatever reason. Secretly, the Wolf Queen knew that this unusual sight must have something to do with the fact that she had murdered Arya, but she remained silent. Fragments of images of her fight with the goddess flashed through her mind, and the image of the shattered, wolfish skull kept repeating in her thoughts. Your Majesty, said the dog, what's wrong? Are you not well? Do you want to take a break? And no. It's nothing. Let's move on. It's still far, she rebuffed. Amarok had already fallen asleep and was in a meadow, as he had been in one of his dreams a few years ago. Finally he was here again and could see the original she-wolf again. This had not happened in all the time since his previous dream. This time it was a Kopacheka who gave him access to this world. Perhaps the experience would be different now. Amma Jaja? Where are you? He shouted and strolled through the grass. Confused, he looked around and did not understand why the good-natured she-wolf did not appear after a short time. Was something different from the last meeting? Had he unconsciously done something then that was necessary for her to appear? So did the Kopacheka make a difference? The wolf lay down insecurely in the grass and wanted to wait. Surely the mother wolf would show herself to him, if he only had patience. After a while, however, he already suspected that she would not come and asked himself, where are you? He stood up again and only now noticed, when he looked at the sky, that the sun was high in the sky and the bright, big full moon as well. An image that could not exist like that at all. What the? He spoke and looked back and forth between the star and the satellite a few times. The sky was bright and blue on the side of the sun, and jet black on the side of the moon. It was divided in two, which seemed very unreal and contradicted all laws of nature. It could not be, but the wolf was in an in-between world and had no idea how the circumstances affected things here. While the male stared at the sky, the moment when Chenerah told him that Aram rose after Banato's murder and became the sun itself flashed through his mind. That was why he had not been present when Arya and Amarok met. "Look up, Amarok. There it is," Arya had once told him, and they both looked toward the sun. "No. It can't be," he now exclaimed in shock. "Jaja. Amma. Oh no. No, no, no. Say it's not true." He had understood, Arya the she-wolf, his Jaja, was dead. Ascended, become the moon itself, murdered by the last person she spoke with, Serena. The male dog quickly opened his eyes, gasped for air and sat up. "Amarok. Thank the gods. What happened?" his friend asked, hugging him. They were still on the creek, but they had already exited the tunnel and it was broad daylight. "Where are we?" asked the wolf, looking around. The green valleys of Samojija had disappeared, replaced by high cliffs through which the watercourse squeezed. "My darling, it's noon again. We just couldn't get you awake." When Chenerah saw the rest of the Kopacheka, he immediately realized what must have happened. "Why did you visit Arya?" The wolf's face looked enraged, and when he said, "Why don't you ask the queen what's wrong with our Jaja?" the Alsatian did not understand. "What does he mean?" the dog asked the monarch, who just sighed and paddled on. "Tell him, you witch!" shouted the young wolf. "It was an accident? We didn't mean to," stammered the fawn, and slowly the dog understood too. "What did you do to her, Serena?" he asked in a quivering voice, and his friend shouted, "She killed her." Stunned, the Kesar stared at the regent and demanded that she explain herself, whereupon she immediately stopped rowing. "We got into an argument. Jaja told us everything about this stone and its meaning. When we realized that by taking it away to Alsatiania she would let the people overrun our realm, we lost our temper." "You must be joking, Your Majesty. You told me only yesterday that you were always so composed," the dog waved off. "She's a goddess. You can't possibly key. Or can you? It can't be." "I was there, Chenerah," Amarok confirmed, and she was not there. At the same moment, the sun and moon were visible in the sky. It was day and night at the same time. She rose, as her husband once did. "She is dead." The dog's lips quivered as they steered the boat ashore. He promised the queen that she would be punished once the conflict with the humans and the foxes was over. With tears in his eyes, his friend had clenched his fists and threatened, "If I didn't have such respect for you as my queen, I would kill you on the spot." "It was not intentional. Believe us. We don't know what came over us." "We are so sorry," Serena pleaded, and they were unusual words for someone of her stature. "Listen and calm down. Both of you," the sheepdog commanded. "What's done is done. We can't change it now. I'll talk to the lead dog and ask her for advice. We'll dock here and walk the rest of the way." "Who is this leader dog?" asked the wolf. "She leads our race, almost like your queen." "But I thought you were the leader of the sheepdogs?" His friend didn't understand. "No, that's not quite right. I am the sovereign, not a leader," Gajaze explained. "Being the Kesar means sovereignty and freedom in all matters. I'm the only one she can't dictate to. That's because in my country, you're judged on your merits for the community." "And that means?" "Later, my dear," the older man shook his head. "We don't have time for long explanations now." When they reached land, they moored the boat to a barren bush and stepped onto the rocky ground. Without further words, they continued their journey, Amarok and his queen walking after the sovereign, for he was the only one who knew the way. After a while, the wolf walked beside his friend, leaving Serena a few steps behind. She visibly struggled to overcome the small and large rocks, moving skyward bit by bit. "I'd like to kill her most of all, Chenerah," Amarok whispered, and his dog shook his head. "That," he said, "would certainly be the wrong way to go. The violence must end. That is exactly why we are here," either we conquer the man in the mountains unknown to him or we find another solution. I don't want more and more blood. Enough is enough. Still, she deserved it. What do we need her for, anyway? Then Gajaze stopped and stoutly grabbed the male wolf's shoulders. She did something bad, yes. But she is, damn it, Chenerah Gajaze's descendant in direct line. Shall we kill your queen and let Samojija perish as headless and leaderless as Arimaria? No, Amarok replied sadly, you're right. I'm just so angry at her. How could she do that? Without answering the question, the sheepdog turned and looked in Serena's direction. Come on, let's help her, was all he said, and from then on they stayed together. Why are you so generous, Chenerah? The wolf asked himself. She doesn't deserve it. If you want it, I won't harm a hair on her head. But only because I love you. Several steps of the arduous path over scree and branches further, they arrived at a small village, which the rock revealed quite gradually. It seemed as if someone had carved a large hollow in the middle of the stone to allow a few inhabitants to live here. There were no paths, let alone roads. Larger houses, architectural masterpieces like those in Arimaria or Samojija, were not to be found here. Amarok had never been here before and recognized the small mud huts with their thatched roofs only because of stories told in his homeland. The world seemed to be a very different place here. The climate was cool, the air very clean, except for the smoke from a few small campfires. The wolf already suspected that things like electricity, tap water and high-tech were not known here. What a car was, one would not know here, although that had also been true for Samojija a few years ago. Gajans never found access to the mountains, the Hedonaries. They were impassable for them and therefore uninteresting. This seemed to change recently, because Samojija had by far not the abundance of rare earths and metals to offer as the country of the dogs. Everyone knew that mostly the wolves were allowed to supply themselves with raw materials from the Hedonaries, for the shepherd dogs themselves needed them only to a small extent. They were said to be true survivors who managed very well with the bare necessities. However, there was one thing they actually liked to mine: iron. From this, the talented Canids made jewelry, everyday objects, decorative items and weapons, which they sold at markets all over Samojija. As the three of them passed a mine shaft, Amarok remembered his hunting knife and how his friend had given it to him when they were strangers. His look was a bit sad, he might never hold this magnificent gift in his hands again. Yes, the dog interrupted his musing, I made the knife from iron that came from this very mine, Amarok. We are here in Ketharin, the village where I grew up. A beautiful, quiet place, Serena praised, looking around in fascination. Despite the barren soil, palm trees grew everywhere here, which in turn were entwined by other plants whose flowers shone in different colors. It seems to me that someone has created a little oasis in this wasteland of rock and sand, marveled the young male. It is already somewhat different from Samojija, or even Arimaria. Here is to be found that silence for which the townspeople long with you. In this silence lies the truth of the world, Chenerah said proudly, as a couple of young anthros came running up to him, shouting joyfully, Kesar! Zornis, Kesar! The called one was also visibly pleased, took one of the children in his arms and spoke a few friendly words in a language Amarok had never heard before. Then he set the boy down again and gave him a fatherly pat on the butt, meaning, now off with you. All the dogs that rushed over now, males, females and puppies of all ages, seemed to know and like Chenerah. They all wagged their tails wildly and almost couldn't get themselves together. The group was surrounded and scantily clad ladies placed colorful flower wreaths around the necks of the strangers, Amarok and Serena, to welcome them. The young wolf had never experienced anything like this before. In Samojija, people were very cordial, took care of each other as neighbors, greeted and treated each other with respect. But this made him speechless, as much as he was happy and enjoyed it. The shepherd dogs made a lot of noise and gave themselves completely to the joyful frenzy, handed dried fruits and water. Amarok had the feeling that everyone wanted to give him and his queen presents. Again and again the wolves said, "Thank you. Thank you very much," but they knew that the dogs did not understand their language. They bowed and the villagers did likewise, after which they became fewer and fewer again and returned to their normal activities. Phew, Chenerah sighed with relief, they must have missed me a lot. It is wonderful, dear Kesar. Rejoiced Serena, her head literally sinking into the many wreaths of flowers that had been thrown over her. "How beautiful is this, please?" asked Amarok, overwhelmed and fighting tears of emotion. Chenerah approached him and for a moment forgot the reason they were here. Gently, he took his friend's head between his hands and looked into his eyes, from which tears were now rolling. "Finally I can show you my home, my darling," he whispered and gave his friend a passionate, tender kiss. "I almost forgot how nice it felt," mused the wolf with his eyes closed, clasping the Alsatian's strong hips. "Why don't you get a room right now?" a voice rang out, interrupting the couple. "Artos. My brother," Gajaze rejoiced and let go of his friend so that he could greet his conspecific. In front of them now stood another male German shepherd, who looked very strong. He was dressed, like all the others here, only with a loincloth and a necklace consisting of numerous fangs. He held a spear with a metal tip and some leather bracelets with embroidery adorned his wrists. The two dogs lunged and joyfully intertwined their hands, after which they gravitated toward each other, followed by a strong hug along with friendly slaps on the backs. "Amarok," Chenerah commented, "this is Artos, my friend and brother." The wolf took a step forward and bowed respectfully. Artos tilted his head and eyed his counterpart. "So this is he, Amarok of Samojija, avenger of wolves and conqueror of the Fox Prince." Chenerah did not promise too much. "You look strong," the native praised and grabbed Amarok under his chin, moving its head back and forth for inspection. "Avenger of wolves, Chenerah?" the wolf asked, ashamed. "Truly you have balls, wolf. With that, you deserve my great respect. He who is a friend of Kesar is also my friend. However, you are not yet fully recovered. In your body, all the bones are not yet healed, the flesh not yet fully grown." Amarok found this scrutiny embarrassing and asked how Artos could know his condition so well. He did not receive an answer, because a moment later the warrior went to the wolf queen, who immediately held out her hand for him to kiss and raised her head wide. This enraptured Artos and he smiled. "Oh yes, just as you said, brother. What a woman! Such stature, such grace. If I were not committed to the army and thus to chastity. Who knows?" As he said this, he stoutly grasped her bosom and added, "Regrettable that we have only just met, Serena, Queen of Samojija." "So?" spoke the monarch, confidently slapping his hand away. "How dare your ruffian touch us? Chenerah, rein him in, or we will have him locked up." Gajaze, however, only responded with a grin, and Amarok couldn't help but giggle either when Artos breathed into her ear, "Very much I'd like to be in a cage with you, gorgeous. I've never had a she-wolf before." "Let it go, Artos," his longtime friend pleaded. "This is a battle not for you to fight." Now the other shepherd dog turned away and said, "I guess you're right, brother. Let's go, the lead dog is waiting for you." Chenerah nodded and the group walked towards a small building made of clay, which was so small that it was impossible to enter standing up. "Please wait here," Gajaze asked, saying that strangers were forbidden to enter. The wolves nodded understandingly, and Serena spoke, "It is so dusty here. We're going to freshen up a bit. Especially after that fiend touched us with his dirty hands." Artos, who had now taken a watchful position next to the entrance, looked at her infatuatedly and licked his chaps, after which he sent her an air kiss and she walked away in disgust. "This will take a while, my dear," the Kesar told his wolf to understand. "Please go after her and take care of her. Remember what I told you, whatever she has done, we need her. If it gets late, let me show you to a guest house. I'll find you." The male wolf nodded, gave his dog another kiss, and then called out, "My queen, wait. I'm coming with you." The Alsatian entered the candlelit room and saw an old shepherdess sitting cross-legged on the sandy floor. In front of her was a small jar in which incense sticks had been placed, their scent reminiscent of vanilla. They smoldered and became shorter and shorter, just as the time until the appearance of the Gajans became shorter and shorter. The male dog squatted opposite the leader, placed his palms on his thighs and wordlessly lowered his head. She had no name, was blind, but could see excellently with her inner eye. At first she looked fixedly in his direction, but after a moment's thought spoke, "Zornis, Kesar of Alsatiania. You have come to seek my counsel, since man is on his way to us." Her voice sounded soft and clear, not at all corresponding to her visual age. Her fur was almost completely gray, her back crooked and her eyes dull. That's right, Chenerah confirmed, raising his head. And I must tell you that the wolves and foxes will not help us, leader dog. It is not even certain that our brothers will reach us soon enough to assist us. She nodded, yes, I am aware of that. The Hedonaries will keep people busy for a while. By now they should have figured out that because of all the interference, due to the massive deposits of mineral resources, they won't be able to get by with their flying machines here. Gajaze nodded. And what help are you going to ask me for on this? She asked. The warrior sighed, we must stop them before they can overrun us. We can't let them reach the Ispasetka. Please tell me what we can do. How many men do we currently have? Most of the women have already fled to the mountains with their children. Maybe there's a good 100 men you can count on. What, there are far too few of them. Spoke the Kesar, stunned. How can you leave this land so unguarded? You were the one who recommended mobilizing all the males that were available, don't you remember? No one could have guessed that this war would last so long. Especially not that this wolf planned and had an attack carried out on the new despot of the Aramarans. Stop! Hissed Chenerah now. It may be that he wanted to cause trouble, yes. But a fox was the one who let this turn into a hit. It wasn't meant to be that way. That's what Amarok told me, and I believe him. Yes, she confirmed, I guess that's true. However, it has happened. To make matters worse, you let Serena taste the fruit of knowledge and enabled her to kill Ianaya, the wolfish goddess. Chenerah nodded silently. He could not and would not lie, a denial was pointless, because this blind dog knew everything. Her great ability was to know the current events everywhere on the planet, which was something like clairvoyance. This made her the leader of the Alsatians. What were you thinking, Chenerah? She asked. There is a reason why the wolves were under the belief that the Kopachekas were not edible, deadly to them. It was clear that if a wolf ever had the chance to meet his goddess, it would eventually come to that. You know how quarrelsome pups are. They don't know how it all started, but sometimes go too far without really meaning to. A wolf killed Alsat, her husband, and a wolf would probably kill her too. That was to be feared. She would never have believed me when I told her about me, the architect, the key to our existence. The address justified his actions. What sense did that make? Couldn't you care less whether she believed you or not? The Gajan relieved you of the opportunity to direct history in a lasting way. Why did she have to learn of the great lie of her faith? It was your arrogance and ego that made you act that way. I have sometimes regretted appointing you Kesar. This made the sovereign angry, but he knew that respect had to be shown to the leader. A Kesar was not the sovereign over everything and everyone. True, he could make free decisions, was not bound by conventions or orders. But that did not mean that he could and should have behaved like an autocrat. However, the choice has been made, because you have earned your place. I also think that nothing is lost yet. Although I have seen what Serena of Alsatiania has done to Ianaya, and also feel the imbalance that now prevails in the world, I still see a way to save our species from the will of the architect. How do you know it is he who threatens us in the form of the Gajans? I know who he is, what he does, and also that he can't see everything. Not me, for example. I don't understand, Chenerah admitted, looking confused. He is called the architect because he is the builder of everything. A man, a Gajan, who writes a book. I am aware that all this is a fiction, a game on his part. It is for the purification of his mind. If you have known all along, then he must have given you, as an invention of his mind, this knowledge. Why would he do that? Where did you really get this information? You became Kesar as well because at that time you were still very much connected to him, you were a unit in a way, before he created you. Surprised by this statement, the shepherd dog jumped up and asked in shock how he could trust her now. After all, she had done nothing against the Earthling's influence. But she only looked dumbly at this and instructed him to sit down again, which the respectful male immediately did intuitively. For a long time, you basked in an arrogant fantasy of omnipotence, had the reins in your own hands. Since you and the human being have looked into each other's eyes for a moment, however, they have gradually slipped away from you. And relatively early in this fiction. A shame, because you weren't strong enough to stand up to yourself. You were tempted to look into your own soul instead of leaving things as they were. An imperfect course of action. So it is with the Vulpes Lupus Canis, the work of an architect. No matter how hard he tries, there will always be flaws in it. Your whole work is not perfect, and here, too, as it is with a building, there are angles into which the architect cannot look. Chenerah sighed again and thought, she may be right. Why was I so stupid and let myself be seduced by my own offer? I broke everything and turned it into shards. I'm confused, he now revealed. You should be, too. Because that's what you were happy to do with your protagonist Joliard and Amarok. Now you dare to do it to yourself. What point is it that the Gajan can't look at? This one, Alsatiania, he got a curt reply, looking uncomprehending. He has lacked the lifetime to expand this story as large and extensive as he would have liked. He dies, soon enough, has to hurry. This leads to carelessness. There is no map of Alsatiania, because it is only a mention in passing. That you would come here again was never planned. So why describe another nation? So why keep an eye on them? The fighter mused now, understanding. Of course. We can do whatever we want here without him knowing. That's great. The wise woman nodded. But he must have been watching me the whole time I was in Samojija, right? I think he was more focused on the fight between foxes and wolves at the time, she indicated. It also means that he made a mistake when he relieved me of my steering duties. He now doesn't see through my eyes either. I see you understand, Kesar. What else follows from this? If he wrote that Ianaya, Area, Jaja, whatever, moved the Ispasetka into the Lake of Hednaries, he can't see it anymore either. So, it should be safe, right? Well, the old woman replied, he did write it down that way, so that the Gajan would run in the same direction as you and Amarok. Losing sight of him with it is probably a risk he had to take, because he had accidentally let you out of his sight. What advantage does all this give us then? Do you really not recognize it? She asked, looking as if surprised by the question. This stone, Kesar, being what it is important in every way. What it means is what matters, apart from the fact that people crave the energy that emanates from it, it carries the symbol of origin. This symbol is the focus on which the eyes of the world are directed, no matter where it is. So now, when people are attracted to it, come to this land, the architect loses all of them from his sight, and they will either be easily defeated, or become uncontrolled butchers, depending on how the scribe had designed them at that moment, just before they cross the border to Alsatiania. I see. So we have the problem that there could be two extremes, and we should prepare for that. Right. But what are we doing? A handful of fighters armed with spears, arrows, bows. Against an army of a few thousand soldiers with machine guns. I know the humans are also out for revenge against Amarok. Their president was killed. And let's not forget the Aramarans, they would be happy to get their hands on him. So? We could just send the symbol of Ispasetka back to Aramaria by putting it in the hands of the wolf, she suggested. No, we don't. The younger one shouted angrily, clenching his fists. You can't seriously think I'm going to let that happen. They won't court him properly, they'll kill him as soon as they can. As Kesar, he was then told, of course you get to decide what is right for this country. But be warned, if people invade here, nothing will stand. If we can get everyone's focus on Amarok, they will turn around and go after him. They want revenge on him, and besides, they know the value of this symbol. Chenerah remembered that Amarok had wanted to turn himself in, but he had refused. So, should it really be that his wolf should run into the arms of the enemy just to save Alsatiania and its treasures? So that a war would end? He knew this sounded like a good plan, but to give up his friend for it? He didn't want to do that. Why him? Can't I take the focus with me? I hereby volunteer. Let them rather attack me, he offered, but the leader shook her head. You may have been a kind of god through your connection to the architect, Chenerah. But that is no longer the case. Your idea would also draw people away from our terrain, yes. But the Aramarans would not make you pay for Amarok's crimes. Yes, and? The sovereign folded his arms. You know that the war between the two nations cannot end, all will not come to their senses until Amarok has been punished. You really mean he should die? It is not certain that they want to kill him. However, we can launch a rescue at the right moment. He just has to hold on until the situation is stable for us. That's how we'll get the Ispaseka back. The important thing is that he goes. Surely it is possible to let him die officially, by the hand of an Alsatians. But that must then look credible, not correspond to the truth. Dangerous, the male interjected. That's true, Kesar. It's a risk, but doable. Then what's the point of taking the Ispaseka away? I thought it was supposed to be protected? As long as it is on the move, the Earthlings will chase after it. I will have it retrieved, along with the officially fallen Amarok, as soon as he has lured the humans far enough away. By then, the remaining Alsatians should be back among us. If, but only if, the other Canids haven't already beaten the Earthlings, we'll destroy the rest of them. Phew, the dog sighed, slapping his hands together in front of his face. I must say, you've thought this out finely. Really? However, I will discuss it with Amarok. He should decide, after all, he's risking his fur here. Then he started laughing ironically, saying what a bullshit it was to think about asking his lover to do that. As sovereign, that's your decision, the dog nodded. I'll ask him what he thinks. That is the only thing I will promise. And how are we supposed to get the stone? How is Amarok supposed to carry it, when only a deity can move it? What good would it do the people where it now lies? Even they could not move it. Do you think that would stop them from looting and destroying everything here? They would take the time to figure out how to unleash its energy. With their ingenuity, I wouldn't be surprised if they eventually found a way. We need to recover it before they do and use it to trap them. Well, that may be. But how will Amarok move it? How will he get it out of the lake? Ianaya is not going to help us. She's dead. Remember? I'm aware of that, too, he got in reply. But what you don't know is that some of her divine power passed to Serena when she died. What? But how? Therefore, she is now able to recover the stone from Hedon Lake and could take it away, along with Amarok. Again, the male looked perplexed, noting that all this seemed as if someone had planned it. Still, he repeated, he wanted to talk to Amarok about what the options were here. Yes, Chenerah, if you want, talk to him. I, for one, see no alternative, the dog spoke, telling him to come back with a decision as soon as possible, as time was of the essence. She made an inviting gesture with her hand, so Chenerah stood up. Send Ardos to me. I have something to discuss with him as well. Of course, her counterpart now spoke and left the cottage after a bow. Now he felt bad, they couldn't be serious. There had to be another way than making Amarok the bait. But he knew that this was a plan that could eliminate all the problems in one fell swoop. He couldn't resist it, even if the mere thought of its execution was absurd. Serena. Why had she concealed the fact that part of the power of the wolf goddess had passed to her? Was that why she had acted a little strangely? Was the possibility of moving the point of origin what Aria wanted to achieve with her last saving act? Was this something that the architect now knew and directed, or not? The dog remembered that long ago he had written passages of text for his book. Back then, when he still had a piece of control. Now he missed that time. Now he didn't know a great many things and there were no known choices, paths or a firmly defined future. Everything now had to move toward him, happen on its own. An uncontrolled, open destiny was now looking for its fulfillment, without anyone being able to consciously change it. If the leader was right, the writer of the Vulpes Lupus Canis could not have guessed what he was thinking now, what plan B he was making. Determined, he said to himself, the stone stays here. Whatever happens, Amarok, I will stand by you. I swear it. Our nations will perish for all I care, but you I will protect at all costs.